and welcome. This is the first ever international network call on what's working in transition. My name is Shaktari Belew, and I'm one of the original transition trainers here in the US, and I'll be your host for the next 2 hours. But before we get started, and forgive me for constantly changing my eyesight, but I have some notes I have to read. Before we get started, I'd like to orient you a bit to the Zoom video conference platform that we'll be using today. Everyone is currently muted to preserve sound quality, but there will be plenty of opportunities for you to share your experience and insights throughout this call. If you are calling in from your computer or tablet, you can signal your desire to speak by clicking on Participants in the main toolbar and selecting Raise Hand. If you're calling in from your phone, you can virtually raise your hand simply by typing *9 in your keypad. I'd also like to invite everyone who can to turn on your webcam so we can see each other. And if you're able to access our chat function, please leave a comment there to let everybody know where you're calling from. Okay, so for the next 2 hours, we'll be exploring a couple of key questions together that have been designed to help us harvest the wisdom we've gathered from working to create more resilient and thriving transition initiatives all over the world. As you may know, this call was conceived as a follow-up discussion to the keynote roundtable on the transition movement, past, present, and future, that was recorded for the recent Transition US online summit by Transition Movement co-founder Rob Hopkins, Transition US co-director Don Hall, and Transition Network delivery director Sarah McAdam. If you didn't get a chance to watch the recording, no worries. Most participants on this call probably didn't either. But we are delighted again to have Rob, Don, and Sarah with us today. I will be giving them a few minutes each to share some opening remarks. So let's start with Rob.
If my Wi-Fi is no good, can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Oh, well, I'll try then, because I hardly heard any of that you said. My Wi-Fi. I live in a part of England which is like a sort of Wi-Fi desert, really. I guess I just really wanted to, I'm really looking forward to this conversation in terms of people's reflections on the times that we live in and the role of transition in those times. You know, this weekend in the UK, we had the launch of this thing called Extinction Rebellion, which is a much more direct approach around climate change, with lots of people putting themselves forward to be arrested and to blockade and, you know, sort of civil disobedience, non-violent civil disobedience. And my wife was one of the people who was arrested there on Saturday. And so it's a really fascinating question for me around how, you know, one of their key things is to say this is a climate emergency. We are now in a climate emergency. And so the question that sits with me is, how does it look if we declare a climate emergency in the places where we work, in our families, in our churches, in our businesses, or whatever, you know? And how transition and those things sit alongside each other, and whether we can bring that same sense of this is an emergency, we need to accelerate it, to the work that we're doing in transition of building building what comes next, mobilizing the people around us. Can we generate the same level of focus around declaring a climate emergency as an opportunity. And so the question that's been sitting with me for the last year as I've been writing this book I'm doing is to say, why is it that when we hear that term climate emergency, or when the IPCC say we need a rapid, far-reaching and urgent response, we don't all go, fantastic, brilliant, great, okay, we can reimagine everything. So that's what I'm interested to hear from people this evening. I don't know if anyone heard any of that, because it's all gone a bit glitchy, but fingers crossed you did. And it's lovely to be here.
Okay, next, Don.
All right. Great. Yeah, nice to be here with you all. Nice seeing everybody typing into the chat from around the world. Yeah, as Shaktari said, my name is Don Hall. I'm co-director of Transition US. And before that, I worked for about 8 years first with Transition Colorado, which was a statewide hub for the transition movement. And then with Transition Sarasota, a local initiative. So I do have a real appreciation for the challenges that grassroots transition leaders face on a regular basis, as well as the incredible value that we get from learning from each other in this movement. Part of the context for this call, as I see it, is that the transition movement's been active for 12 or 13 years now internationally, depending on how you count it, and just over a decade here in the Transition US. And we've learned a tremendous amount about how transition works and how it doesn't, in a variety of locations and contexts all over the world. Here in the US, 164 official transition initiatives have formed across 38 states since 2008. Dozens of these initiatives are still doing amazing work, leading greening projects, facilitating local investment networks, operating free stores, publishing energy dissent action plans, and so on. Many of these stories are collected in our 10 Stories of Transition in the US series that you can see at transitionus.org. And I'm sure we'll hear about many other inspiring examples during the course of this call. However, I also think it's important to note that more than 2/3 of the official initiatives here in the US are currently inactive. Many of them have gone on to work on other important projects related to transition and responding to the climate emergency. But I think it's also important for us to really look at how we can better support the health and thriving of transition initiatives moving forward. And I believe that everybody's insights here today will help us to do that. And as we know from the recent news and events connected with climate change, our world desperately needs an even more robust and impactful transition movement to kick into high gear, complementing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other essential efforts around the world to cultivate resilience, justice, and sustainability. We are all the seeds of a better future, and I believe that when we come together like this, we provide each other with the nourishment that we need to flourish and grow. So very much looking forward to the rest of our conversation.
Yay. Thank you. Sarah?
Hello, everybody. I'm feeling really moved just seeing all your faces and the messages that are coming in from all over the world. It's really touching me. The thing I wanted to say, just to start us off, was to follow on really from what both Rob and Dom were saying, really feeling the sort of urgency and the pressure of these times, and really keen to explore with you and to hear from you how we navigate our way sort of skillfully of speaking about urgency, honestly, without just getting into a crazy hamster wheel world of doing, because we know that that's so unhealthy and got us into the, from my perspective at least, it was part of what got us into this mess in the first place. So one of the things that I'm feeling right now is that one of the most powerful things that we can do at times like these is to name with clarity, with compassion, with courage, and also with curiosity, what we see happening in the world. You know, to really name what we see. And then also to let ourselves feel the impact of what we're seeing in the world, and to express the sort of emotion of how that's impacting on us personally. And actually that for me is something really powerful, that if we can do that ourselves, and if we can find skillful ways to do that in our groups, you know, there's something a bit magical that can happen. So with that in mind, we thought we'd start this process. We really wanted you to start talking rather than just having to listen. So we thought we'd start with something small but potentially quite powerful, to just test what happens when we express those feelings about what we see in the world. So in a few minutes, we're going to, well, less than a few minutes, any moment now, Don is going to put us into little groups. I think we'll manage pairs, won't we, with this number, Don? So you'll be put into pairs, and you'll have a short time, 10 minutes in total, to just explore with your partner 2 questions. What are your greatest fears for the world? And where do you find a sense of hope? And what we'll do is you'll be invited to go into your pairs. You'll see a little message on your screen. You just follow the link, and we'll put those. We'll transmit those questions into your room so that you can see them. And when you've had your first 5 minutes, so make sure that both of you get a chance to speak. When you've had your first 5 minutes, Don will let you know and give you the second question. So the first question that you're starting from is, what are your greatest fears for the world? If anybody's getting lost or has any questions, just put a question in the chat window and one of us hosts will help you. But Don, I think we can split up into our groups. I hope you found that interesting. I know it was probably much too short, but you just got a little taste. So we're going to just experiment with a way, because we thought it would be good to gather some feedback from that, but it doesn't make sense to try and get everybody to tell us what they've said. So we're going to just try a little experiment, and we're going to use a free platform that some of you may have used previously. It's called Slido. And we're going to invite you to use that platform to just register a sort of snippet of what you've just discussed. So let's think how to do this really clearly. What you'll need to do is follow the link that I've just put in the chat window and open another window that gets you into this platform. And you'll stay on Zoom, so you should still be able to hear me, but you'll open a separate window. And I'm also going to just share my screen so that you can see. You can see the details. There you go. So you join slido.com, and it will ask you for a hashtag to say what event you're joining, and you just use the word transition.
Okay, and I'll just say Zoom may have just gone to full screen for everybody, so you can just hit escape and then you should be able to get to your internet browser window.
Thanks, Don. And you'll see in the, hopefully as you put in the hashtag transition, you'll see a question come up there, which is choose one word to express your fears for the world. Is that coming up? She asks.
It came up for me, Sarah.
That's a good sign, Don. So, oh look, I can already see people are putting their words in. That's exactly what you need to do. Oh, it's very exciting. I'm not going to let you see the words until a few more people have added them.
Although if you keep the Slido window open, you can see it as it's being created.
Oh, that's neat.
So I'm just going to try and, yes, I just need to stop the share for a minute and I'll then go into the, there we go. I'm going to just share now the word cloud that we've just created together. Let's just give ourselves a moment to breathe and read those words of our fears for the world. And then I'm going to open another poll. So choose one word to express your hopes for the world.
It's pretty cool. Oh, and I see Sarah in the chat. Sherry Stuber asked for somebody to read off what's on the word cloud because not everybody can see what's on the screen.
Okay, so this is the word cloud about our hopes for the world. The biggest word, guess what, is community. Two others that have got some power are awakening and love. And then there's lots of other words: solidarity, maturity, regenerative, non-violent communication, people, light, cooperation, collaboration, localism, lots of others. But right there in the middle, the word community. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and invite you to come back so that you're back in the Zoom room and can see who else is here with us. And apologies, I actually, what I'll do, because somebody, I see that there was the message, I'll just tell you what the fears for the world. Actually, I don't think I can go backwards off the top of my head, but we'll make sure that both of those word clouds, we'll share them with everyone at the end so that you can, it's a takeaway from the session. And with that, I'll hand back to Shaktari.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all three of you for getting us started in such a vibrant way. We'll hear briefly from them at the end too, but now it's your turn. And so I would like to read the first question, well, actually the only question because it has multiple parts. And then I'll give you the instructions as to how we're going to go about doing this. So here's the question. What have you learned from doing transition in your community that might be helpful for other communities to know? Are there models, perspectives, or practices that have informed and strengthened your work? And if so, how have they been helpful? Okay, I'll read those again before we break out. Because we have people on the call, a lot of people on the call, we're going to start off addressing this in breakout groups and then come back, and Don will handle the breakouts just like we did a moment ago. And just as you saw, a button will pop up, and if you click that, you'll go into your group. You'll have about 25, let's see, is it 25 or 30 that we decided, minutes, and we'll indicate, you know, the progression of the
I think
time.
we said 35.
35, okay, okay. And then after that, we'll automatically bring you back just like we did. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to share with you a brief story that may help create some context. When I teach art and perception workshops, which I've done off and on for decades, I invite my students to sit in a circle surrounding a simple coffee cup. The students each are asked to draw the cup from their particular perspective. Once these drawings are completed, they are hung on a wall and carefully observed. The class discusses the difference in perspective represented by the drawings and notes how each student noticed different details. For example, highlights, shadows, reflections, you know. Just like the students in the exercise, the way we view transition and all of life are profoundly influenced by what I'd like to call perceptual filters that consist of your individual backgrounds, experiences, biases, thoughts, and beliefs. If we only view these perspectives in isolation, each of us may come to the conclusion that we are drawing completely different cups, if we go back to the art students there. However, when we consider them together, we can begin to see patterns and celebrate the importance each person's distinctive viewpoint and approach offers to the overall understanding of the totality of that cup. And this is true of projects and issues we focus upon as well. So I just want to give you a little note. Don will stay in the main room to assist anyone who is having technical difficulties and assign latecomers to breakout rooms. He'll also post chat messages to the breakouts, letting you know when you have 5 minutes and 60 seconds remaining. Okay, now I'm going to repeat the question. So this is our big question. What have you learned from doing transition in your community that might be helpful for other communities to know? Are there models, perspectives, or practices that have informed and strengthened your work? And if so, how have they been helpful?
Yay, unmuted rebellion.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute you all.
Mute us
I'm gonna
again.
mute you all now. Sorry. Except for Shaktari, who is now unmuted.
Okay.
Over to you, Shaktari.
Okay, so I'm just going to where we did our breakout. Okay, so we're coming back, and you remember the instructions about how to raise your hand? Go down to the screen. Let me go back to that so I can read it to you again. Excuse me, scrolling through everything here. So you go down to where it says, those of you who took notes and whoever of the group is going to be speaking and sharing the wealth of what you came up with, just look where it says participants on the main toolbar and then raise your hand. If you're on a phone, you can hit star or *9 on your keypad, and that will raise your hand. And then hopefully I will be able to answer you. So let's see what we're getting here.
Not seeing any hands raised yet. So if you want to share some insights from your group, please raise your hand either by, like Shaktari said, going to participants and clicking on raise hand, or typing *9 on your keypad.
And we'll see if we can share the wealth of what we just came up with. Okay, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We didn't actually discuss who's going to talk, but if Shari or Nicola have other things to bring up, please do. Let's see. I was impressed with what Transition Media in Pennsylvania, it's a pretty small town. They do a lot of partnering, so that's one of the models. Partnering with other organizations and local government. They've gotten a great reputation of being a good partner. They show up, they help others. They receive a small grant from local government as well. So they're building up a reputation in that space. So I think that that is something any one of us can do. And I know that Transition US, we do that somewhat here locally as well. Even though we're nationally focused, we do partner with our local government and Sebastopol Grange Hall, which is another national organization. And so really do try to work in that space as much as we can. And another, I think, easy lift is what we do sometimes here as well, is just identify a local pub that has sort of drink specials around the end of the day and invite people to come for conversation. So we just have sort of happy hour and cocktails. And people drop in, and we generally stay past the time we thought we would. So it's an easy, simple thing to do. And another sort of big bucket area, I think maybe because I'm in Northern California where the fires are blazing for the third time in a year, that there's a lot of conversation around social cohesion and emergency preparedness. So that topic is alive and well, and projects in that space, there's a lot of interest in that. So we've got our Ready Together project model on Transition Streets that focuses on near neighbors coming together, but the focus is on household preparedness, but with the support of neighbors as you go through the various chapters. There's a lot of interest in that kind of thing, or in conversations convened around disaster preparedness, again, in a lot of parts of this country, and certainly where I live. So I think there's space in that space to build some really good processes and models. And then the other thing that Nicola brought up, which I love, and I hope we further, maybe Nicola, you're going to talk more about this too, but she was mentioning that all of, when Transition Network has calls for proposals and all these brilliant ideas come in, if there could be a way to broadcast all of those ideas to everyone as potential funders, because that's just for the hubs, but what would it be if all of the transition groups put in all their brilliant ideas? So I'm excited about a really big crowdfunding event that lists brilliant ideas that people cannot help but fund because they know they must get done.
Wonderful.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Please note that we have the Transition Media website on the chat if anybody wants to check them out. And we will be adding all kinds of links and notes for everybody on the chat. So be sure and check that out. The next person we're going to go to is Chad Pilieri. If I can get you to, yes, there you go. Thank you, Don.
Hello, how are you? You said my name pretty well there. I had a really international group, which was very interesting, from all of Hungary and Colombia. The stuff they were, I guess they have a lot more experience than I have. I'm kind of new to everything, but a lot of them did have groups, and sometimes they seem to have, sorry, I have my son's castle behind me.
Cool.
They definitely said, you need, it's very important to start with a small committed group, that they all emphasize that's very important, because otherwise it tends to drift apart. They mentioned also getting together in informal areas is a good way. A barbecue or a happy hour sounds good. I like that one. And, even using the capitalistic model, and I find that interesting because, I think we're so against that, but, maybe to use, marketing techniques or, language is very important, linguistics. They said that's very important, how you present yourself. And Ben's from Hungary, he mentions eco-linguistic course. I think he might have posted that. I don't know if you guys all got that. That he said that was really helpful to him. But they said he also mentioned a donut. It's important to have someone as a coordinator, because I guess he said there's a donut effect of sometimes like a hole in the middle that needs to be filled. Languages and capitalistic, and what I got from it seems like a lot of people are involved in permaculture as well. At least not, I am, and it seems like many others. That might be an interesting model to follow. I think permaculture is very successful. How you could, once you take the 72-hour course, you could then become a teacher from it. Like maybe Transition could come up with something like that, as far as 72-hour, and you become a certified transition course teacher, and then you could then. I think that's what permaculture is growing pretty quickly, because there, so many people get involved on that level, and it's growing. So it was a very interesting crew. But it does seem like a lot of times these groups start up and then they kind of fade out. So I think it's really important how we find a way to keep it going. But it was very nice meeting my group. Thank you.
Okay, do we have other people that have their hands up? I'm just scrolling through. Don, do you see anybody?
No, I don't see any hands up currently.
Okay, well, I will go. I was nominated to go for my group then. So I had a wonderful group from Montreal, Budapest, and Vienna, and and Ashland, Oregon. So it was lovely. And we looked at what's worked. And one of the brilliant ideas that the people in Vienna came up with was an eco-village where they actually test a lot of their theories. It was part of a broader new town that was created around a lake or a pond. The name of it is Aspern, A-S-P-E-R-N, and I think we're going to have that up on the chat in a moment. But they actually set aside this area in which to test a lot of the things that they were doing, and to look at the feedback and to look at what works and what doesn't work, and to gather that information. So they actually had a place designed for that, which I found to be brilliant. And then to share that knowledge of what they were experiencing. And it looks like, I think they might want to correct something of what I'm saying. Let's see. Okay, so I'm sorry, here it is. Here it is. It's Seestadt Aspern, or Seestadt Aspern, and it's the link is right up there on the chat now. But they also talked about creating playgrounds of possibilities, which I love that term. In the village, they did the experimentation. It was an oasis in which the community can come together and tell stories. They talked about connecting making a network of storytelling and connecting with the universities in the area so that they can actually then embrace what they're learning throughout the educational system and throughout the larger community. They also partnered, of course, with their organizations and the governments. And I just, as we listened to him describe what they were doing, it ignited excitement in all of us in the group. It was, and I want to just highlight that the kinds of ideas that people are coming up with, there's a creative surge of excitement, I think, that touches everyone in their heart and the very foundation of their being. And when we were talking about all those words of hope, that's where that comes from. There's just such an essence of who we are as creative beings that is tapped in this process. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Do we have anybody else who would like to raise their hand now?
I think we got two in the queue. Mike from the UK and Marcos in transition.
Great. Don, will you choose one of them and click it because I'm not seeing
Yeah,
it.
so we'll do Mike first here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Don. I think Jean-Paul was happy to feed back. I'm happy for him to do it if that's why he had his hand up. If not, I'm very happy to.
Okay, is Jean-Paul Marcos in transition or?
Jean-Paul in Paris. Did you want to feedback, Jean-Paul? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute Jean-Paul.
Yes, you can talk, Mike. It's better.
Okay. I made notes. That's what I've offered to feedback. So when the things that came up for us were Jean-Paul was talking about. Oh, sorry. So we had people. Jean-Paul from Paris, Jeffrey from New York, just outside New York, the Catskill Mountains, Gabriella from Brazil, and Dream from Italy. And the things that came up for us. So Jean-Paul was talking about what they've been looking at doing was in getting more people involved. So increasing their reach has been a really useful thing. So being able to get more people involved has meant they can create more groups and put on more workshops. And they've been having, they now have 15 workshops, which include meditation and bike repair and lots of other things. And that's really helped to increase the amount of people who hear about transition or get involved in transition. And also, I suppose it gives more, the fact that they have now 15 different workshops happening it's creating many more opportunities for people to engage. Jeffrey was talking about, from New York, was talking a lot about the things that they've been doing. So they have repair cafes, herb spirals, charging stations for cars. But one of the biggest challenges they're finding is the area in the Catskill Mountains has quite an established community, which is actually quite conservative. And because of the political situation within the US and all the stuff which is going on with Trump, is that it's one of their things they've been really doing is trying to keep politics sort of out of transition and being able to think about how to communicate with people who are maybe more right-wing or more conservative about the issues that transition is trying to address in a way which is bringing people with different political viewpoints together to have those conversations. And Gabriella from Brazil also talked quite a bit about the fact that obviously with the political change in Brazil and the fact that it feels quite polarized within the community, which is a challenge. What she talked a lot about was that the fact they do, as a group, they do a lot of dragon dreaming, using dragon dreaming techniques together, and using non-violent communication skills. And we had a bit of a conversation around how conflict is dealt with within the group. And it sounds like, because the group's been established for quite a long period of time, it's almost, I think, nearly 10 years or maybe more, that they now have a culture within the group where there can be conflicts, but what like she said is that it doesn't necessarily break things. So they have ways of, there's quite an openness to work at that if there's conflict which comes up, and in general the group is very cooperative and collaborative with each other. So that was quite inspiring to hear that, you know, that people are being able to create groups which, you know, they can deal with what's going on and support each other, even if they don't necessarily agree or if conflict comes up. And then a Dream from Italy was talking, who's not involved directly in a transition group, but is doing a lot of work around circular economy. I was talking about the importance of finding solutions locally, and what they have seen as really works is that to keep those solutions local and push on that edge, you know, so to really begin to think about how can that local impact make change. And the big thing she was talking about, which was really important, was getting a range of stakeholders engaged, but having a system where feedback is really immediate, if possible. So people are constantly hearing what's happening and able to build on that and move along quickly and be able to respond to what's going on. So people feel really engaged, and people were able to work closely together because of that. And one of the projects she talked a bit about was they did a food waste project where they were collecting a lot of food that was going to waste and distributing it, working out ways to distribute it locally. And finally, one of the last things, the thing I talked about was that I'm not involved in a transition group, but I work for a transition network. And one of the things we did last year was to hold a series of regional workshops around the UK. So we looked at where there were clusters of groups who hadn't really communicated with each other, and we came up with a one-day workshop where we invited everyone to come together and share what helped their groups to thrive, what helps their groups, what are the barriers for transition for them, and then getting them to think imaginatively about what they could do at a different level of scale. So what could they do to support each other, and what could they also do if they came together and thinking that little bit bigger. And we will be, just to let people know, we're going to be releasing a guide and the workshop that we've held, the facilitation guide for that as well in the quite near future. So if anyone, just keep a look on the Transition Network website, we'll let everyone know. But what was really, just to finish, what was really inspiring, because I went to most of the workshops because I helped facilitate them, was that just getting people together in a room like we are today, seeing everyone in little boxes, like these little visions, little windows into all around the world, the transition world, but getting that together, getting people together in the same room just to build those informal relationships was really, really inspiring. And lots of people have mentioned that at the end, you know, as a lot of feedback we got was, you know, just to know that there are other people doing the same thing nearby and you're not just on your own. So that was, that's me. Hopefully I didn't go on too long there, but I wanted to feedback properly. Thank you.
Okay, we have got Jenny and Marcos have their hand up, and we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay. Hello everyone. Marcus and I are in Totnes. We, again, were also with a very international group. I didn't write down everyone's names, unfortunately, but if anyone in the group has anything to add as I'm saying it, please do, because we didn't actually agree on me feeding back either. I just happened to be the person taking the notes, so I will do my best. We talked a lot about permaculture and learning about permaculture being a really useful tool, and just generally applying permaculture principles to designing and growing communities. We talked about community as a garden. We talked a lot about learning to collaborate and learning processes for working in groups, learning about dealing with conflict, building relationships, forming collective visions, so letting go of individual visions to form a collective vision, and those sorts of skills being really valuable. We talked about tools like the one that we're using now, so Zoom, being a really useful tool for forming connections around the world and forming incredible relationships that are really impactful and can be really transformative across distance. And we talked about having a way of having a diagnostic of the situation, so of the world, of the global situation, and being able to understand what's happening globally and what does that diagnostic look like, being really helpful, and the development of tools around that. We also talked about economy and social enterprise, and about having legal structures for social enterprise being helpful, and about when we talked about when what we're creating or building comes up against the existing system and the conflict of that. There were specific things that came up, so like cultural evolution as a really useful discipline or area to look into. Values and frames from the Common Cause Foundation, so quite kind of some specific names and tools that we shared on the chat in writing. Yeah, I think that's kind of sums it up.
Great. Could you add those links to the chat so everyone has them?
Yeah. So the links, the names of things, yeah, they should. I'll add them again, yeah.
So that we can go ahead and look them up and use them in our work. That's wonderful. And you had talked about some of those feedback loops and how you, well, wait, before I go into that, I want to make sure I'm not missing somebody's hand. Excuse me. I know we can all fall into deep discussions here, but I want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. Don, do you have any other hands up right now?
I don't see any other hands at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I think Kathleen or Kathleenu has her hand up, and Claudia has her hand up just on the video. So we could go to them. I'm unmuting you, Kathleen.
Just quickly, the one thing that was said in our group was the importance of telling powerful stories about how things are working. And we had a lovely little interaction in our group, chatting with a young woman who was on a bus in Croatia, sharing a story about starting a zero waste cafe that was, I found very inspiring to hear about what she was doing around the world. And a young man in Sonoma County, where I lived as a young woman, and just being able to talk about the powerful positive stories about how transition is working is a very important attractor. It's a really important factor in getting people on board and staying, you know, committed. I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you. And so again, that's an invitation to be documenting your stories and sharing them, please, all of you. This is constant, and the more we share, the more we all learn. So thank you.
And I think Claudia had her hand up too. I can't see everybody's video, so it's easier to do the raise hand thing on the participants dashboard, but I'll unmute you, Claudia.
Yeah, so just briefly, we were 4 people from different countries, one from Mexico, one from London, I live in Sweden, and one from the States. We had a really good idea from London, which is like a community larder or a community fridge where they use food that would otherwise go to waste in the local community, and they have a fridge so that they can like share it out to people who need food. And then they had edible bus routes, which is kind of like the incredible edible idea, where the bus route of London goes through various different transition neighborhoods. So they do transition things along the bus routes and grow food, which I really like that idea. In Sweden, where I live, it's an interesting situation because the government and the local municipalities do really, really good environmental, like the transport networks and the recycling and stuff. But the actual transition towns is not so much, it's not so embedded as it is in other countries. So on one level, it's working, but on another level, it's not, because it's such a rich country that it's like, if it's not broken, why try and fix it? So I've lived in poor countries and I've lived in rich countries. I've lived in Spain, I've lived in different countries, and I can see how transition is working differently in different countries. And it seems to be that the poorer the country, the better transition works, and the richer the country, conversely. And it's interesting. And I think people who live in affluent neighborhoods in different countries maybe find this kind of similar model. So I think it's a way of connecting with people who care about this stuff as well as much as we do, and finding the older people in the community perhaps to link with, and making it a social network, you know, not just a environmental network. So I think that's something that I wanted to share. Yeah. Also, there was something that we did in Barcelona, which was really successful, which is called the Transition Walk, which Rob talked about in one of his books a few years ago. So I don't remember which book or which chapter it was, but maybe Rob can put the link on. But yeah, it's the Transition Walk is an interesting idea where basically you get to know your neighborhood really, really well, and you look at your neighborhood from a transition point of view, and then you invite other people to see it through transition eyes. So it's like putting on your transition glasses. Thank you.
Excellent. Do you see anybody else, Dawn? Thank you. Okay, I think we are just about at the point where we need to move on to our ending. We have 15 minutes left. First of all, I want to thank everybody. That was incredible, and I'm hoping that everybody can gather the information on the chat and your notes themselves. Excuse my dog. Excuse me. Okay, so and I want to invite us all as we complete this to just look at the openness, creativity, and complexity of the ideas we've learned today. Claudia, what you just said reminded me of how important those perceptual filters are. That we develop our perceptual filters based on our individual backgrounds, experiences, biases, thoughts, and beliefs. And I invite us all to explore that within ourselves. What are our unique perceptual filters? And look at how we control that. Before I go any further, I want to give us a chance for Rob, Sarah, and Dawn to say some closing remarks. And then I'll thank you all again at the very end. So Rob, would you like to go first? Did I jump on that too fast?
No, I've said I went first last time.
There we go. So I didn't hear what you just said. I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time?
Me?
Yes, any closing remarks you would like to say?
Well, I said I went first last time, so I'm going to throw it over to Don.
Oh, we're going to reverse it. Got it. Okay, Sarah, would you like to start?
Oh, let me just breathe. It felt like there was so much there. So what's the things that are coming up for me are, I mean, a familiar thing, but something that always feels powerful is that concept of glocal. You know, that the power of glocal, of acting locally, but with this strong awareness of global context and the power of these global connections that we're experiencing right now. So I'm loving, you know, I feel like that's something that I personally would like to keep exploring, how we keep making these global connections around this local work, because for me, there's something here about creating a sense of interdependence, which is real and which we so lose in the world we live in and the way we live at the moment for many of us. So that sense of, you know, the impact of how I'm living my life in the place I am, the impact can be felt in other places. And I want to connect with and know that those are, you know, those are human beings living there, and see how they're experiencing life, and understanding that all of it's connected and beyond human beings, of course, to the planet and the beings that we share the planet with. So there's something for me about this meeting being a little moment of feeling our interdependence. And I know how different it was for me to talk to Caroline in California and hear her description of the fires. You know, there's something different about that than knowing about it on the news, and really feeling that thing of how are we all experiencing climate change and the impact of climate change around the world, and making that real for ourselves, and then helping to make that real for other people. Sorry, I could go off onto a little world of imagination about that. This feels to me like, I suppose what I want to say is this feels like a conversation that's only just starting. I felt the power of it, and I felt the shallowness of it. Almost every piece I want to go into more depth. And I think particularly, I really want to explore that question of, you know, when we're talking about there being, how do we support people into a real awareness of how little time there is and how we are living in a climate emergency? How do we support people into an awareness of that without overwhelming them, and then support them to act? Because that, I think, feels like, you know, one of the questions for the time, and there's so much more we could say about that. I just wanted to I'll end with one thing, which is another little plug. I'm really excited by the Municipalities in Transition project, which is going on now around the world, connecting up, and there's a number of people on this call that are involved with it already, but connecting up people, groups, and supporting groups and municipalities to find new ways to collaborate together, you know, that local government level of scale. And of course, in some political situations, local government is not our ally, but there are many places where I think it can be, and it's a place where there are resources to be activated, and there are other human beings within local government that are, you know, the politicians and the officers who are overwhelmed and confused about how to respond to what they see in the world. And actually, there's something about coming together with their community and together acting to do something differently. So Don's already put the link there. Thank you, Don. There's a website that you might want to explore, and there's some really interesting webinars coming up exploring hot topics that, look, there she is, about to, Nicola's message, about to announce a series of webinar discussions, which I think are some really interesting discussions that people may well want to join in with.
Thank you.
That's me.
Shall I go next, seeing as am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
It's the second Skype in a week when I have been looking at the back, what's behind Shaktari, and thinking Shaktari lives in a really cool house. I'm very impressed with that house. This has been really valuable for me. I really needed this. This was really, really useful. So thank you, everybody. It was really, really. You can all see how messy my bedroom is. Oh dear. It was really, really useful for me to see everybody and to tap into everything. I feel like I'm living in a country at the moment which is in the middle of an outbreak of mass stupidity, where like all of the thing that with Brexit has been that it has just subsumed everything else. There's been no room in the political dialogue for anything else for about 2 years now. It's just, and the government has not been able to do anything else apart from Brexit, it seems like, for all of that time. It's been like Margaret Thatcher's "there is no alternative" kind of writ large, really. I feel the discussions about a climate emergency and this declaration of a climate emergency, it kind of feels like the transition movement declared a climate emergency 12 years ago. It doesn't feel like that's a new kind of idea to me, and actually I think it's really important at a time when more and more people are going, shit, there's a climate emergency, and how would we do things if there was a climate emergency? Actually the transition movement has an enormous amount of learnings and tools and resources and insight to share. And for me, like one of the most important things is the thing around stories, actually, and the idea that at a time when it feels like the possibilities are closing down and more people are sort of talking about dystopias as though there was nothing else, telling those stories about how it turned out okay. And like I said in the small group I was in earlier on, actually when the government says we're going to cut carbon emissions by 80% by 2040, that's not a story. That doesn't give us any sense of what that would be like and what it would taste like and what the bird song would sound like and what the street parties would be like. And there's something that I think that because many of us involved in transition have spent a long time in that sort of imaginary space about what it could be like, and then attempting to sort of coax it into the present. I love that David Graeber says, it's one thing to say another world is possible, it's another to experience it, however momentarily. And whether it's through storytelling or through building practical alternatives that people can see, it's so important. And for me, one of the people always say to me, well, where does your hope comes from? And it comes from you lot, and it comes from being part of a network where we can meet like this and share our experiences, and and we know people are all out there doing different things wherever they are, even on a night bus heading home from a zero waste cafe in Croatia. It's really magical. So I've really loved this. It's been really, really special. Thank you.
Okay, and I guess I'm last up before Shaktari has a few closing words. I know we only have about 5 minutes left here, and but I can be brief because Rob and Sarah said most of what I wanted to say anyway. So yeah, I think the one thing that I'd add to this is just I'm fascinated by processes. How does a group of people, all volunteers with no resources, just their own kind of personal connections in a community, start something like a transition initiative and take it to a place where it can really have a very significant impact on the future of that community, can kind of bend the trajectory of that community. And I guess for that, because I don't have time to go into it, just to encourage everybody to go back and look at that keynote roundtable that Sarah and Rob and I did for our recent National Online Summit hosted by Transition US. I just put the link in the chat. It's on the Transition US YouTube channel. And I think that there's a lot of good stuff there. I would say on the climate emergency that, yeah, I agree with Rob. You know, we've realized there's been a climate emergency for a long time here in transition. And I think it's important that we don't panic and, you know, try to start taking really, you know, drastic actions and drop the kind of slow building community resilience work that we're doing in transition. I think the work that transition does is still really needed. Yeah, we have some incredible tools, some incredible models that can be replicated. And I think we need to keep going in that direction and just bring more and more people in as they're waking up to the severity of our predicament. So just want to thank everybody for being on this call today. And like Sarah said, I think this is the beginning of a much longer conversation, and I'll look forward to that.
Yay. Thank you very much, all of you. This has been so rich. First of all, I want to apologize to anyone who has their hand raised and didn't get called upon. Please share all of what you wanted to share in the chat so that we don't miss out on your valuable input. And that brings me to the thoughts that are just running through me after this juicy 2 hours. We've talked about how we look at the world, how different it is. You know, Claudia brought up that for some of the countries that are, the areas that are very comfortable, it's a little more difficult to broach the subject of transition. For those who aren't in their comfort zone as much, it's much easier in some ways. So as we explore that, just that whole wealth of perceptual filters, what we're seeing through, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, what is the unique perception and voice you bring to the table? So going back to the cups and looking at them from all different angles, what is the voice you bring? Because that's what we need right now. And I know you know that because you're here on this call, but I want to invite us to really maximize that when we talk to the other people out there also. And I know you know this. Rob points out something very lovely in some of his talks. He talks about how we moved away from thinking and designing in diverse ways. And he talks about, in one of his talks, he shows a scene from one of his favorite parks. And he talks about how nature handles water in many diverse ways. And so when it rains, you get the mist that drips down through the leaves. You get all kinds of different ways that nature recycles that water before it ever actually goes deep into the ground. It's used over and over and over again. And so my question to us is, how can we do the same? How can we be just as diverse, creative, and efficient with our own designs? And I know we ask ourselves that over and over again. And I know that many of you are already doing that. So I want to encourage you to share that, share your point of view, share the knowledge. This is the first of our feedback loops at this scale. And I want us to continue this. And I hope that this juices you and sparks even more of that process. So how can we actively include even more diverse points of view into our work? So that any topic we're addressing includes a more whole systems approach that takes into account not only the obvious, but also the hidden, the less known aspects that are impacting not just now, but over time. And I find it delicious that in almost everybody's share, I heard an element of that. So one of the concepts that I see happening over and over again is that we ourselves in transition are changing our lens to a more whole systems lens. And that is evident in everything we're doing. So I just want to thank you all. This has been delicious. Sarah, I believe, has some yummy feedback. She's going to show the 2 pictures at the end here of what we did in the word clouds, just so you can see those one more time. And thank you for taking the time out of your lives right now to be here and to share your wisdom. That is, that in itself is a huge gift. And I hope that you feel as fed as I did and all of us. What I've learned from listening to everybody here and all of the years of transition is that our movement is stronger than it has ever been before. It's just the beginning of a deeper exploration. So I want to invite you to please visit transitionus.org, transitionnetwork.org, sign up for our email, our newsletters, and visit the YouTube channel, the Transition US YouTube channel in the next few days, so that you can revisit this and all of the valuable videos that are there. And so until we meet again, we just want to unmute and let you all say goodbye to each other. And Sarah, if you could put those screenshots, if you have them up, that would be wonderful.
I haven't got the sound, the word clouds, but we'll include them in the blog. But I did want to just remind people that there's one final question if they want to answer it. What are they taking away from the session? But you don't, it'll stay open, so you've got time to do that after this meeting, and you'll see the responses from others.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
It's a privilege of being.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Wonderful people.
Bye.